Welcome back to the deep dive. We've got a stack of sources today, articles, some research, historical notes, and we're diving headfirst into a really fascinating corner of Japanese popular culture. Our focus is radio-controlled cars, RC cars. Specifically, we're looking at their incredible impact in Japan, kind of through the lens of two major players, Tamiya and Kyosho. So our mission really is to unpack the history, the influence, and the, deep cultural connections these brands and this hobby built over there. We're going to explore how these cars became way more than just something you drive around, how they were almost, well, romanticized.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're not just plastic and electronics, are they? In Japan, they really evolved into symbols of creativity, technical skill, a real passion for automotive detail, and for so many people, a link back to, cherished memories.
Okay, let's jump right in then. To really get a handle on this phenomenon, we've got to start at the beginning, see how these two companies kind of laid the groundwork.
Right. Well, Tamiya's story is quite interesting because it doesn't actually start with models, not at all. They began as a sawmill way back in 1946.
A sawmill, okay.
Yeah. Then a few years later, 48, they shifted into wood models. And then critically, in 1960, they embraced plastic kits. Their very first one was a 1800-scale Yamato battleship.
Ah, and that's where they started building that reputation for incredible detail and quality, isn't it? Their motto, first in quality around the world, that wasn't just talk, that precision really carried over.
It absolutely did. You saw that quality focus immediately in their first ever RC model, which wasn't a car, actually. It was a 1/16-scale M4 Sherman tank, released in November 1974.
A tank, okay.
Yeah, and it already had that hallmark scale realism Tamiya was known for.
Okay, so that's their first RC model. But the sources seem to point to a different release 2 years later, November 76, as the real catalyst.
Okay.
The thing that kicked off the first big RC car boom.
That would be the 112-scale electric RC Porsche 934 Turbo. Yeah, this car was a genuine game changer. It took Tamiya's stunningly detailed plastic bodies. I mean, they looked just like the real Porsche,
Right.
and put them onto an accessible electric chassis.
Right.
Before this, RC cars were often rougher, mostly pretty expensive, and usually needed noisy, kind of messy engines. The 934 was beautiful, relatively easy to use, and it just opened the door to a much, much wider audience.
So Tamiya triggered the boom, the big electric boom, but here's where Kyosho comes in. Because they were actually first to the mass-produced RC car market in Japan, weren't they?
That's a really critical distinction, yeah. Kyosho was founded earlier, October 1963, and their DAH-1, which came out in 1970, that's widely considered the first mass-produced RC car in Japan.
Wow.
4 years before Tamiya's first RC model of any kind.
So Kyosho was already out there pioneering RC cars, focusing more on performance maybe, while Tamiya was still perfecting plastic model kits of planes and tanks.
Yeah, exactly. Kyosho's early models, like the DHH-3 and their Dune Buggy Y in 1972, they were instrumental in actually starting the RC buggy racing scene. And they were innovating technically, too, like they produced the first wheel-type transmitter.
Oh, the kind everyone uses now.
The very same, yeah, it's the industry standard now. So
Yeah.
you kind of connect this to the bigger picture. You can see how these really distinct starting points shape their identities, right? Tamiya leveraged their modeling expertise to bring these super realistic-looking electric cars to a broad, often younger market. They effectively grew the hobby hugely.
Right.
Kyosho, meanwhile, already making RC cars, they focused on performance and innovation for the existing hobbyists, or, the aspiring racers.
Yeah.
You could say Kyosho innovated for the established hobbyists, while Tamiya expanded who that hobbyist could even be.
And that just sets the stage perfectly for the massive waves of popularity that followed these huge RC booms.
Oh, the 1980s were definitely the peak of the electric boom, and it was absolutely dominated by Tamiya.
This is when the really legendary cars showed up, isn't it? The sources mention the Hornet, 1984, credited with kicking off a global 2WD buggy craze.
Huge.
And the Grasshopper, which was maybe more popular partly because it was more affordable for kids.
Exactly. And Tamiya wasn't just making great models, they were, well, masters of media integration.
The Tamiya RC Car Grand Prix TV show, that was massive.
Absolutely critical. Running on TV Tokyo from 84 to 99, it televised races, showcased their latest models. It basically turned Tamiya off-road cars into nationwide bestsellers. It brought all that excitement right into people's living rooms.
So while Tamiya is driving this huge popular boom with TV backing, what was Kyosho focused on during the 80s?
Kyosho really doubled down on competitive performance. They released models like the Scorpion in 82, then Tomahawk in 83, specifically designed to be top contenders on the racetrack.
And this focus led to, international recognition for their racing pedigree.
Precisely. Their Optima, was a major player right from the first 110 electric buggy world championships in '85. And then the Ultima actually won the 2WD World Championship in 1987.
Wow.
Plus, they had enormous global success, multiple world titles, in the 18-scale gas-powered buggy category with their Inferno series. That thing was, and still is, a true benchmark for high-performance RC racing.
Okay, we absolutely have to pause and talk about another Tamiya phenomenon from the 80s, even though it wasn't technically RC, Mini 4WD.
Ah, yes, Mini 4WD. An entirely different beast, but yeah, equally impactful in its own way. Launched in '82, these were small, 1.32 scale, battery-powered four-wheel drive cars, designed for track racing, no remote control needed.
They kind of started as an affordable way in for kids who couldn't maybe jump straight into full RC, right?
Exactly that, a gateway. But then manga like Dash, Yankuro just took off and created this cultural explosion around them.
An explosion.
Seriously, the sources note that by 1989, the average boy in Japan owned somewhere between 8 and 11 Mini 4WD cars.
8 to 11, good grief.
Tamiya sold over 100 million units by 1995. It was this distinct boom, totally driven by affordability and that media tie-in, acting as a major gateway into vehicle hobbies for a whole generation.
Okay, so wait, let's unpack this. This wasn't just about selling models. It was about using media, TV shows, manga, comics to build something much bigger around the products.
Yes, absolutely. It transformed these plastic cars into aspirational objects. It injected them with narratives of competition, adventure, technical skill. That media mix strategy, especially Tamiya's ability to deeply integrate with popular youth culture, created a cultural phenomenon that really went far beyond just the hobby itself.
And you can really see the difference in approach there. Kyosho was achieving incredible high-level success in competitive racing around the world, which obviously built their reputation among serious hobbyists, their racers.
Yeah, hardcore crowd.
But Tamiya, through TV and manga, reached this vastly broader, younger audience and just embedded themselves completely in that generation's childhood memories.
Which is absolutely key, I think, to understanding that romanticization aspect we mentioned earlier. Those memories are powerful.
Now let's shift gears a bit, because the hobby itself didn't stand still. It evolved, particularly with the rise of something like RC drifting.
Drifting, yeah, that emerged in the late 1990s, and it was directly influenced by the growing popularity of full-scale motorsport drifting, which was huge in Japan.
And it started very much from the ground up, didn't it? With enthusiasts just like modifying their existing touring cars.
Completely grassroots, totally user-driven. A famous early DIY innovation was people literally wrapping standard rubber RC tires with strips of PVC pipe.
PVC pipe, seriously?
Yep, to reduce the grip, make them slide sideways easily. Pure ingenuity from the hobbyists themselves.
That kind of user-driven innovation, that must have prompted the manufacturers like Tamiya and Kyosho to react eventually?
It certainly did. It led directly to the commercial production of hard plastic drift tires, specifically made for sliding. And then, yeah, companies started releasing dedicated drift car models.
With specific features for drifting.
Exactly. Things like rear-wheel drive chassis becoming more common, adjustable suspension tuned specifically for controlling slides, different weight balances, that sort of thing.
And technology kept pace, I assume?
Oh, absolutely. Advancements like brushless motors offering way more power and control, electronic speed controllers or ESCs getting more sophisticated, and things like gyro stabilization.
Gyros, like in drones.
Sort of, yeah. Tiny electronic gyros that help keep the car stable and controllable during those long, counter-steered slides. They completely revolutionized performance and made complex drifting maneuvers much more accessible to more people.
And the internet must have played a huge role here, too.
Enormous. Online forums, social media later on. They allowed enthusiasts all over the world to share tips, set up secrets, videos of their runs, organize meets. It turned RC drifting from what was maybe a Japanese niche into a truly global phenomenon.
And now we're actually seeing a kind of resurgence in Japan, right? For RC in general.
Yes, definitely. It seems partly influenced by recent global events keeping people closer to home, but a really major driver is the popularity of reissue models from the 1980s.
They're literally bringing back the classic kits. The Hornet, the Grasshopper, those ones people remember.
Exactly. Tamiya especially has been re-releasing many of their iconic 80s buggies, and often, fascinatingly, they're marketed at prices quite close to their original RRPs, maybe adjusted a bit, but leaning heavily into that nostalgia factor.
And that appeals directly to the adults who grew up during that first big boom.
Absolutely. They're buying these cars to relive their childhood memories, maybe build the kit they always wanted but couldn't afford back then. And often, the sources say, they're introducing the hobby to their own children.
So it's bridging generations. And broadening the base beyond just the hardcore racers or drifters.
Exactly right. You see a definite rise in what you might call light fans, people who enjoy the building process, the collecting aspect, or just casual driving in the park,
Yeah.
alongside the very active competitive scene. It's widening the appeal again. What's fascinating here is the RC drifting trend really shows how user innovation, stuff coming straight from the hobbyist community, can actually drive market development.
Mhm.
That's quite different from the big manufacturer-led booms of the 80s, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Bottom up versus top down.
Right, and the current resurgence, fueled by nostalgia, really highlights how deep-seated these cultural memories tied to Tamiya and Kyosho actually are. Those classic models act as powerful triggers.
And those memories, those cultural connections, they were absolutely forged and amplified by the media narrative surrounding them.
Crucially so. Manga in the 1980s especially played a massive role.
Ratty Convoy in Korokoro comics seems like the prime example from the sources. It heavily featured Tamiya cars, the Wild Willie, the Hot Shot, the Fox.
The synergy was incredibly deep, to the point where Tamiya actually produced real-world models that first appeared as designs within the manga itself.
Seriously, a car existed in the comic first.
Yeah, imagine that feedback loop between the media and the product. These series made RC cars seem incredibly cool, adventurous, a symbol of skill and friendly rivalry. They made kids want them.
And even though it sounds like Ratty Convoy was very Tamiya-focused, Kyosho wasn't completely ignored, were they?
No, not at all. Kyosho models, particularly their high-performance buggies like the Optima, were often depicted as the cars driven by the main character's rivals.
Ah, the rival's machine.
Exactly. But this wasn't necessarily negative. It implicitly acknowledged Kyosho's competitive strength and their technical prowess. It kind of positioned them as the brand for the serious contenders, the experts you had to measure yourself against.
So painting Kyosho as the skilled rival actually might have added to their mystique for a certain type of hobbyist, someone who wanted the pro gear.
Precisely. It created a different kind of aspiration. And we should mention Radicon Kid and Comic Bomb Bomb as well, another manga that contributed to the Tamiya boom during that era.
Okay, so Tamiya dominated the 80s manga scene, but Kyosho has strong modern media connections too, right?
Yes, definitely. Notably with the initial D series. That's been huge.
The street racing anime and manga?
That's the one. Kyosho has produced many Mini-Z models, their popular Micro RC line, and also larger die-cast models of the iconic cars featured in Initial D. The E86 Terreno, the RX-7s, the Skyline GTRs. They've really tapped into that massive automotive enthusiast and anime fan base through that connection.
Clever. And we really can't understate the role of television again, can we?
No, the Tamiya RC Car Grand Prix show, running for 15 years, being solely sponsored by Tamiya, constantly showcasing their products, their races, that solidified their brand recognition across the entire country. It was just relentless positive exposure week after week.
And beyond those specific shows, RC cars and drifting pop up more generally now, don't they? And video games, movies, definitely online videos. The drifting scene is huge on YouTube.
Absolutely. And you even see it reflected in some recent TV shows. Characters rediscovering the hobby, that nostalgia playing out. Plus, we shouldn't forget the hobby magazines like RC World and RC Magazine. They've been vital for decades in showcasing new models, sharing technical tips, building that community.
Looking at this whole media landscape, it really strikes me that it wasn't just advertising or product placement in the simple sense. It was about building entire worlds, narratives, and identities around these machines.
That's a great way to put it.
This constant presence in entertainment in magazines, combined with the hands-on experience of building and driving, that's really what romanticized these brands, especially Tamiya, for a whole generation. It elevated them beyond just being products. They became cultural touchstones.
It's exactly that layer of cultural meaning that's so fascinating. And it leads us naturally into thinking about the broader impact these brands and the hobby have had.
There's the sheer appeal of craftsmanship, isn't there? The actual act of building the kit.
Oh, absolutely. Tamiya's kits, building on their long plastic model heritage, are famous for their detailed instructions and the satisfaction of the assembly process itself. It's part of the experience.
Whereas Kyosho kits might appeal more to those interested in the mechanics.
Often, yeah. Maybe more focus on the mechanical tuning, the performance aspects, how the different parts interact for racing. But either way, it fosters this appreciation for engineering, for how things work.
And it keeps people engaged with technology too, doesn't it? From understanding simple gears and levers in the early days right up to modern electronics like brushless motors, ESC programming, gyros. It's really hands-on learning about mechanics and electronics.
It absolutely is. And perhaps just as importantly, maybe even more so, is the community aspect. And now, of course, the huge global online community sharing everything instantly. These communities drive innovation, they foster camaraderie, they keep the hobby vibrant through that shared passion and, yes, friendly competition.
But Tamiya seems to have this particularly unique, deep local connection as well.
In Shizuoka, yeah, known as the world's model capital.
That's quite a title.
And the stats back it up. Shizuoka Prefecture apparently accounts for a remarkable 82% of Japan's entire plastic model market shipments. The area has this long, long history of craftsmanship, woodworking, and to me is truly its modern icon.
They even have things like the plastic modeling plan, where they've turned model kit parts, like the sprue trees, into designs for city monuments and benches.
It just shows how deeply embedded Tamiya is in the city's identity. They're involved in educational programs in schools. There's the huge annual Tamiya Fair, which draws massive crowds. They operate the large Kakegawa circuit nearby. Tamiya isn't just a company in Shizuoka. It feels like it's part of the city's cultural fabric.
That's amazing. And that contrasts a bit with Kyosho's impact, which feels maybe more globally focused or targeted.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Kyushu has tremendous strength in international markets, particularly among competitive racers and increasingly serious collectors. We mentioned the Inferno series, a global benchmark in 18-scale racing for decades. And their Mini Z line created a whole worldwide micro-RC phenomenon.
And they branched out too.
Yeah, they've diversified very successfully into the high-quality die-cast model car market since 1992, which expands their brand reach well beyond just radio control enthusiasts. You know, if we try to connect this all to the bigger picture, you really see this dynamic interplay. You've got user passion driving innovation, like with drifting. You've got technology constantly opening up new possibilities. And then you have manufacturers like Tamiya and Kyosho responding to that, but also leading with their own distinct approaches and strengths.
Yeah.
This constant evolution, the way the hobby caters to so many different interests, building, painting, tuning, racing, collecting, just messing about. That's what keeps it alive and relevant across generations. And Tamiya's deep integration into Shizuoka, that shows a kind of cultural footprint that's incredibly relevant for any company, let alone one making essentially toys or hobby products.
So bringing it all together then, Tamiya and Kyosho really were these twin titans that shaped Japanese RC culture, but with quite distinct strengths, wouldn't you say? Tamiya drove the mass popularization, the media synergy, making it accessible.
Yeah, broadening the church, so to speak.
While Kyosho focused more on the performance edge, the technical innovation, appealing to the serious hobbyists, the racers, the collectors.
Exactly. And this idea we started with, romanticization, it feels like it's that whole process where through decades of media exposure, community building, the hands-on experience, and now the powerful force of nostalgia, these brands and their products became more than just items you buy.
Right.
They became cherished cultural artifacts, symbols of Japanese ingenuity, maybe of playfulness, and importantly, connection to the past, connection between parents and kids, connection within communities. It's the culture itself, really, that has romanticized their legacy.
And interestingly, while they were definitely competitors, it sounds like their strategic differences actually allowed them to coexist pretty effectively, and in fact, collectively pushed the entire hobby forward in Japan, almost acting as complementary forces rather than just rivals.
I think that's a really good summary. Rather than being in a constant, direct, head-to-head battle across every single segment, they often excelled in different areas, which allowed the overall market and the hobby itself to grow and cater to really diverse interests. They both benefited from a thriving scene.
So looking ahead, what do you see for this world? Where does it go from here?
Well, nostalgia is clearly going to continue to play a huge role,
Yeah.
right? Those reissues are bringing people back, bridging age gaps. Technology will obviously keep evolving: faster motors, better batteries, more sophisticated control systems, maybe more integration with digital tools, or even things like 3D printing for more customization options becoming mainstream.
Yeah, I can see that.
New niches will probably appear, just like drifting did. And the community, both online and offline, that will remain the absolute heart of it all. That's vital. Maybe we'll even see a bigger focus on things like sustainability, materials or energy use, filtering into the hobby. This whole discussion raises a really interesting question, I think. Given how incredibly successful Tamiya and Kyosho have been, tapping into these really fundamental human desires, The joy of creating something with your own hands, the thrill of controlling a machine, that love of technology and realism, and the undeniable power of shared memories and nostalgia. How will the next generation of these kinds of hobbies evolve? And what new forms of connection, maybe digital, maybe physical, will they create for enthusiasts around the world in the future?
That is a fantastic question to ponder. Where does that blend of physical craft and technological interaction go next? Thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive into the really fascinating world of Tamiya and Kyosho RC cars and their place in Japanese popular culture. It's truly amazing to see how these miniature vehicles manage to build something so large, so culturally significant. And thanks to you, the listener, for sharing the sources that made this exploration possible today.